Okay, so
Okay.
business and politics. As you already know, politics is number one factor affecting your business. So we must pay attention about the politics. In June, Vancouver Mount Pleasant by-election is coming. Today, I have a chance to talk to one of the candidates, Kimball Cariou from Communist Party of BC. Welcome, Kimball Cariou. Is my pronunciation correct?
Pronunciation is good, and thank you very much for inviting me here.
Okay, as you know, our channel focus on business and properties related stuff. So today I'm going to ask you questions about your plan, your ideas, and about business and properties. But before that, we are going to talk about you and your party first. Personally, I'm very curious about your Communist Party. I got so many questions about your party. What I know is there are many communist countries, and the mainstream of Canadians seems don't like communist countries very much. But your party is here in Canada. Even you are a formal candidate of BC election. That's very interesting. And of course, it's an evidence of Canadian freedom. So before go to my personal questions regarding your party, let's start introducing yourself first and tell us more about yourself and your party, something like that.
Well, about myself, I'm originally from the prairies, from Treaty 6 territory, born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I grew up there. I moved to Vancouver about 30 years ago to become the editor of a newspaper, People's Voice, which expresses socialist views. So for the last 30 years, I have lived and worked in the area of Vancouver Mount Pleasant, along the Commercial Drive, and active in my community and my housing co-op and many of the movements of people in this area. So I am now a British Columbian, and I've been active in communist politics since I was 18 years old in high school. And I became dissatisfied with the effect of capitalism on my family, the poor people in the community where I lived. I began to study Marxism. When I went to university, I looked for left-wing organizations to take part in and found that the Communist Party was the party that stood for the working class of this country. And these were the people that I identified with. I come from a working class background, so it was natural at me for that time to enter into politics from this direction. Yes, we're a small party. We don't get a great deal of public support, but here in East Vancouver, where I'm a candidate, we usually get about 1% of the vote, which is small but not insignificant. And there are many people who like our ideas, but they vote for other candidates for different reasons. So yeah, here we are.
Okay, that's great. And you got a wonderful life, and your party is very interesting to me. So I will ask you some question about your party. You know, communist is very sensitive for many people, and it's a very outstanding name in the, according to the international politics, right? There's so many communist countries. And so my question is, do they attack you or your party? Do they attack you personally? Because, most of the people, they don't like communist countries or parties or something like that. And how can you survive? And what's the relationship between your party and other countries' communist parties? Are you guys related with other countries' parties? I apologize if my question offended you.
No, not at all. This is a natural question. Communism as a political philosophy, as you know, it goes back to the 1840s, to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So most communist parties are inheritors of this political philosophy, this tradition, this side of the working class movement, the people who want a revolutionary change, a socialist society rather than capitalist societies. But communists in each country, they develop their programs, their policies, their strategies on the basis of their own conditions. and conditions in Canada are very different than in Latin America or Asia or Europe. So the Communist Party of Canada was formed in 1921. We've been around for over 100. We do have very friendly working relationships, exchanges of views, visits with communists in some other countries. We have very friendly relations with the Communist Party of Cuba, the Communist Party of China, Vietnam. And we think that it's possible for Canadians to learn something from the development of socialism in those countries, and they are interested in trade, positive relationships with a country like Canada. We think this is mutually beneficial for everyone, rather than a world where countries are fighting each other over different philosophies. We need to find ways to cooperate. Our world is in grave danger from climate change, from increasing poverty, wars, the refugee crisis. So countries with different outlooks do need to find ways to work together to tackle these problems. But communists in a number of countries share their common ideas on some approaches for how to do this. And we are proud to be part of that section of the international political struggle, I guess you'd call it.
That's great. Yeah. So you answered most of my questions, actually. So thank you very much for answering that. So, I did some research about you and your background. I know you fight for the disabilities, and you fight for the workers and the working class. And for my channel, for my audience, most of them are small business owners and property owners. And it seems like they against each other. But for me, if I agree, and they are not very big difference. The small business owners, they are not capitalist. They are not that kind of people. They work very hard, and usually they work harder than normal workers. So for me, and there's no big difference. So today we are going to focus on the small business owners, the small businesses, and the property problems. And so let's talk about the small business. And so what's your plan, and what will you do if you get elected? And if you are in Victoria, and what will you do for small business owners, for the economy of BC? And so do you have any plan about that?
I would answer it this way. For small business owners, and there are hundreds, thousands of people in that position in Vancouver, Mount Pleasant, where I'm a candidate. I agree with you. These are people who work very hard. They have a difficult time to earn a living at a time when there's economic crisis that makes their revenues. They face increased taxation from the city and from higher levels of government. They're in competition with big corporations who have no interest in keeping the small business sector going. So for us, when we're asked about small business, we say if things are better for working class people in society, if people have better incomes, more spending power, more jobs, most of that income will go towards the businesses and the communities they live in, and this will help small business people. And if government revenues are put more towards social programs, housing programs, better education, better healthcare, all of these things, are in the interests of small business owners. They need good education for their children. They need good health care when they get sick. They need to have a society where people can live a normal life. I don't think it helps small business owners when thousands of people have no place to live. They're living on the streets.
No.
This is a great expense for society. So our policies would improve society as a whole, and small business people, I think, would benefit greatly from these policies.
Yeah, so especially nowadays, and we get so many troubles, and since 2020, and the pandemic, and the war, and the inflation rate, and the interest rate, right now everybody is suffering from that. And so many small business owners, they cannot survive anymore. They cannot afford the very high labor cost and the material cost and the shipping cost, everything. The cost is very high right now. So do you have any exact plan after elected, if you are elected, and then to help them exactly, and what kind of policy or action exactly do you have?
Well, we think the tax structure should be changed for one thing in this province. We look back to the Gordon Campbell era. One of the first things the Liberals did when they took office in British Columbia over 20 years ago was to slash the tax rates on the highest sections, the highest income earners in the province, and the corporations. And that reduced provincial treasury revenues by around $3 billion a year. That's a lot of money that's gone into the hands of the very rich, not towards small businesses. And those billions of dollars have largely been used, for example, to invest in condo towers. People have been, flipping properties and making enormous profits. This has driven the price of housing. It's meant increased lease rates, which has a terrible effect on small businesses in the community where I live. We think that money should be recovered. Those tax giveaways to the rich should be reversed, and that money should be put into the treasury and used to lower taxes for working class people, for small businesses. It should be invested in all the things that people need to make our community a better place to live. This would allow the city of Vancouver, for example, to change some of its property tax policies to make it less difficult for small businesses. And from my experience and what I've talked to, the biggest problem that many small businesses have is lease rates, for example. Mm-hmm. How can a small restaurant or service shop pay $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 a month to lease a place to do their business when a lot of the people in the community around them are desperately poor? So instead of making lease and rents and property continue to increase, government should bring in policies to make it more affordable. That's, to me, the most important immediate thing that could be done to help small business.
That's great. It sounds like you have a plan, and I hope you really can help the small business owners and to promote the BC economy. So you mentioned the house and the rent. So let's talk about the house market. And so for the past 1 year at least, and everybody is complaining. Nobody's happy. The tenants is complaining about the high rent, the landlords and complaining about the very high interest rate, a very high mortgage. They cannot pay that anymore. And for the builders, developers, renovation companies, realtors, and everybody is complaining, no business and very slow, and they have no more income. And so it seems like everyone in this area, the house related businesses and our people, and nobody's happy. So something's wrong. And so I don't know how to resolve the problem. And you are doing the election. I hope you have the solution to resolve all the problems and to make everybody happy if it's possible.
Well, to make everybody happy, that's a very difficult question. We think that there needs to be a different philosophy in regards to housing. We live in a country where the right to a place to live is no longer really accepted by governments. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights says that everybody has the human right to a decent place, human rights. But in Canada, over the last generation in particular, housing has been turned into nothing but a commodity, an investment opportunity. Mm-hmm. People are encouraged to to have the idea that the way to success, to protect your family, is to invest in housing, with the idea that it can only go upwards dramatically in value, and you'll be able to make huge profits out of it. Well, some people have made a lot of money out of investing in housing, but the result has been that we have thousands of people living on the streets. People, in this by-election, for example, I met one young woman from Ontario who has a biosciences degree, got a job here, paying over $80,000 a year, but she can't afford to find a place to live. Can you imagine? $80,000, and you cannot afford to rent an apartment. So we think public housing should be made into a public utility. It should be decommodified. It should not be the object of sale on a capitalist marketplace, and everybody should be guaranteed the right to a decent place to live. There should be a massive program to build public housing so that the rents would come down, the prices of housing would be reduced, and this would be certainly in the interests of most people in Vancouver, Mount Pleasant, many of whom are renters or tenants or working class people. We also think that the federal government's policy, the Bank of Canada policy of trying to wrestle inflation to the ground by repeated increases in interest rates, this is driving a stake through the heart of the economy. It's driving many people out of work. It's adding dramatically to the costs of housing. Everybody who has to renew a mortgage certainly knows this is an incredibly painful experience to be going through today. So this is an absolutely wrong approach. We think that the interest rate increases have to be stopped. That's not a provincial government area of authority, but if I was in the legislature, I would be saying our government here in Victoria should be conveying that message to Ottawa very forcefully.
But it's not the provincial decision, right? Do you have any plan and in the provincial level and to do that exactly to resolve the problem?
At the provincial level, we think that there are good possibilities for doing more to increase the amount of public housing. Instead of constantly relying on reaching deals with developers, that part of their development will include low cost social housing. We think this, in the end, is up the average housing prices in this province. So the province and the city of Vancouver and other municipalities should be focused entirely on building public housing rather than trying to find some way of reaching agreements with developers who, to be honest, the big developers are not interested in affordable housing. They're interested in profits.
Yeah, for sure.
That doesn't help most of us.
Yeah, they are not a non-profit, right? So that's their purpose, to make money. So actually, what you mentioned, yes, it is the provincial levels and their job, and they can do that. They have the kind of power. So let me ask you another question. So tell us the top 3 reasons and why people should vote you and to represent the Vancouver Mount Pleasant area.
Well, there's several reasons to vote for me. There are other candidates in this riding, and a couple of them are very strong. Joan Phillip for the NDP has a long and proud record of her own. Wendy Hayco from the Greens is an excellent candidate and would do very well for this riding. Me, I've lived here and worked here, as I said, for 30 years. I know this area very well. I would represent us honorably in Victoria, and I would be there to fight for the interests of low-income people, disabled people, working class folks, the people who really need their representatives to do the most for them. I would be the person who would make that my goal in Victoria, as long as I was the representative. I'm also the person who would bring a different philosophical approach to the legislature. There's nobody in that legislature who stands for a socialist way of looking at society, looking outside the box of private profit and corporate greed. some of the other candidates want to tinker with that, but I'm the only one who would be saying we need a different philosophical and political and economic basis for our society. We cannot save the world, protect our environment, overcome all the economic problems simply by repeating different capitalist policies all over again with new labels. We need a socialist vision of a different kind of world.
Yeah, that's good enough to vote for you and for people already. So, so actually, you're right, and we need the different voices in Victoria to represent the different people, and I totally agree. So, the last question. So, if people want to vote for you, and who can vote, and where, and when, and how to vote?
People who have lived in British Columbia for at least 6 months. They have to be Canadian citizens, at least 18 years. You have to be able to show some kind of residence in the Vancouver Mount Pleasant riding, any kind of documentation that shows you have an address. It is a basic human democratic right to be able to vote in Canadian society. Even if you're a homeless person, if you've been staying in a shelter, you can still go cast a ballot, for example. There are advanced polls being set up in a number of places around the riding of Vancouver Mount Pleasant from the 16th to the 21st of June. On June the 24th, there will be about a dozen polling stations around the riding. They're not hard to find. Anybody can look it up on Google. You can contact Elections BC and ask them where the polling stations are. You can go to places like the Carnegie Center, Britannia Center, the Raycam Center. These are places where there will be polling stations, advanced polling, and on elections day. So I encourage everybody, find out about the candidates, find out where you go to vote, bring your ID with you or some documentation to show that you have an address and take part. It's an important way to really have your say in the way that this province is governed, and a unique opportunity to be able to vote in a by-election.
The last voting date is June 24th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for sharing all your story and your party and share your idea and plans. And thank you very much again and to attend our program.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This has been a very interesting interview, and I wish all of your those who watch your program all the best.
Thank you very much. So every